I want to talk about a personal story. And now here's the thing, right, is that as many of you know, I was a music journalist before I was a investigative journalist. And I was a music journalist for about 12 years. And this is a story about how I was conned by the world's biggest band, by one of the world's biggest bands, the Spice Girls. Now, a disclaimer, they may not know I was conned, but they have certainly made a fortune from my idea. I was the person who came up with the idea that they should have different personas, e.g. Sporty and Baby. Now, let me tell you my story. So I actually pulled out the diary of when I met them. It was 1996. It was actually April the 16th. I've got the entry here of my actual Spice Girl notes, which I will show you more of and refer more to. But basically, I was friends with the head of press at Virgin Records. Her name was Heather. And she had a problem, actually, namely 5 girls were her problem. And that is Virgin had signed them, but it was the era of boy bands where there was all this uniformity and you had like Boyzone and Take That, and they all kind of were quite similar and they all danced the same and all that kind of stuff. And it was young teen girls who were buying these records, and the music industry was like, young teen girls are not going to buy songs written by young girls or young women. They're not going to. Anyway, Heather, my friend, said to me, listen, these girls are so much like you. At the time, I was what was known as a ladette. I spent rather a lot of my time dancing on tabletops, absolutely inebriated in clubs in the West End of London. And I had a fabulous time. But I was very much in that kind of ladette mode, which indeed the Spice Girls were. Anyway, so Heather had said, we've got a problem, don't know what to do with them. Will you come and do some media tutoring with them and give us your feedback about what we could do? Right. So I did. That's exactly what I did. It was April the 16th, 1996. It was a Tuesday. It was supposed to have been the Monday, but I was off my face on the Monday night, only on alcohol. But nonetheless, I loved my drink then. Absolutely. And I partied all night and wasn't able to make it on the Monday. So I rocked up on the Tuesday to No Miss Studios, West London. And Jerry came to greet me. And she was like this flame-haired 20-something. She had this voluptuous yet petite figure. She had a dress on that looked as though it had been sprayed on her. And I think at the time, in an article, I commented, I've seen bigger cushion covers. And she sort of pouted at me. Hello, Sonia, I'm Jerry. I follow her up the stairs. The dress is riding up. I can see her Bridget Jones big tight knickers. As I say, it's mid-April 1996, and I am a freelance music journalist at this time. So the thing is that, so I was told, as I say, no one had a clue what to do with these girls. I was told people don't get them. They think pop bands need to be dressed in matching outfits, but these girls are all over the place, right? So I entered this recording studio with Jerry leading me. I'm surrounded by 4 other girls talking all at once, except that is for the brunette in the pencil skirt in the corner. She's got a pencil skirt on, tailored jacket and heels, later to become known as Posh. And Melanie Brown informed me that she was one of the Mels, and she was dressed in what at the time was kind of considered a street look. Emma was the girliest girl. That was how she described herself to me. She was wearing an above the knee blue gingham dress with clumpy platform shoes, very similar to the styles that we all became used to. The other Mel, tomboyish in a shell type tracksuit. And she proudly informed me that she played football and she did backflips, which was great. Mel B asked me if I minded them smoking. I didn't. She handed a cigarette to Victoria and Jerry. She told me not to tell anyone. She said, it's bad for our image, apparently. But what I realized in that time with them, I was with them for a couple of hours, was that their differences were actually their strengths and not their weaknesses. So what I did was they sort of stood in a line, and I walked down the line and proclaiming what their personas were. And I said to Mel B, you're the hip hop girl, you're feisty. And her response, because I made a note of it, was people find me scary. And I should point out at this stage, I did not name Mel B the only mixed race woman of the Spice Girls, Scary Spice. I wouldn't have done that. That simply is not something I would have done. But I did think, and my notes actually say about Mel B, let's see, I described her as the rude girl. And because that was very much a part of hip hop, you know, to be a rude girl. There was nothing racist about it. That was part of the culture. And Jerry was this, like, I don't know if you remember those old seaside saucy cards, but she was very vampy, And I thought that, you know, she was sort of seaside saucy meets exotic dancer. And I remember asking them all if they had anything that they needed to hide. And there was like shifty eye exchanges all around. And nobody fessed up. But later, I discovered that Jerry had actually been posing nude and fully nude. And Emma, I said to her that day, I see you as the baby doll. I even wrote it down. And Victoria, I said to you, you have a posh, snobbish quality about you. She was very pretty. She had acne, which clearly bothered her because she kept bringing her hair forward to hide the acne. And the thing is that then they started dancing and singing, and it was evident to me that we were not talking about a band with great musical talent, right? So Mel B asked the sound engineer to put on the backing track of Wannabe, and everything that you've ever seen in the Wannabe video is exactly what happened to me in that little studio. They were coming up to my face, they were jabbing me. So I tell you what I really, really want the entire dance routine that you'd seen in the video, they were doing in this studio. And Mel B was like jabbing her finger at me and yelling, I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. And each girl took it in turns to sing after a fashion, and they were leaping around. And except Victoria, again, she was much more behaving in a much more sophisticated way than the rest of them. She lacked dance rhythm. She couldn't sing. She was as flat as a pancake. And in fact, later on, they took to turning off Victoria's mic because there's just no point. She was that bad. But what she could do was pant. And she was actually considered the prettiest of the band at the time. That's obviously down to taste. Anyway, after going through all that and talking about their personas with them, I met the publicist for lunch. I scribbled out the character outlines I gave the girls. The publicist absolutely loved them. This was Heather. And she said she'll use them. And that was kind of the last thing I heard about it. Then fast forward 3 months later, in July 1996, and Top of the Pops magazine was credited with creating the personas of the Spice Girls, right? And suddenly it was sporty baby, scary ginger, and posh. This is a very controversial area here, right? So I mean, what was interesting, right, was Spice Girls obviously went on to be absolutely huge, and their personas were a massive part of it. And so just months after I'd met them, and I think a month after the Top of the Pops magazine, Wannabe was released, and the rest, as they say, is history. I should say Girl Power was an absolute nonsense. It was all men, other than Heather, who was their PR, who was then replaced by a man, but it was all men pulling their strings. And it's very interesting when you look at the different versions of who named the Spice Girls. Wikipedia, of course, credit Top of the Pops magazine, right? They say that it was, concocted by the editor and a writer on the magazine who came up with Scary Spice. Well, that is very possibly true, because I certainly didn't, right? And neither did I come up with Ginger Spice. I wanted her to be Saucy Spice. But I was very much involved in defining what their personas were, because even they didn't realize it, but they were naturally that way. They weren't contrived at that point. Now, I would like to say that I'm not saying that the editor of Top of the Pops magazine is lying, because clearly this is the official narrative. But what I can tell you is I came up with the idea 3 months before and gave it to the publicist at Virgin Records, who was responsible for also organizing the photo shoot with Top of the Pops magazine. So make of that what you will. The wiki entry, of course, as I say, covers the official narrative, but not all covers the official narrative. There have been some pieces published who have been prepared to duck that official narrative. The Mail on Sunday published a piece by me, which I'm going to put a link in the description and you can read it. And also Sunday Times, and nobody ever challenged it, by the way. And the Mail on Sunday, such a huge newspaper, you'd think they'd challenge it if I got it wrong, right? And also Sunday Times best-selling author Sean Smith included me in his book. And Channel 4 approached me a couple of years ago because they were doing this massive multi-part documentary about how the Spice Girls changed the world. And I'm going to read you part of the letter from the producer. Hello, Sonia. Hope you're well and don't mind me getting in touch. My name is Alice and I'm a documentary producer, director, making a landmark social history series for Channel 4 about the Spice Girls, using hundreds of hours of archive footage, etc., etc., etc. I came across your name whilst researching how the girls got their personas and found your interview in Sean Smith's book really interesting. It is clear what a key role and impact you played in shaping the band initially. And from researching your career, I feel like you'd have insightful things to say about the cultural landscape at the time and how that has changed over the subsequent years. That was 72 films. They've made such programs as Educating Yorkshire, Gogglebox, The Trump Show, etc., etc. So big production company who does a lot of regular work for Channel 4. Anyway, 3 days before the documentary came out, they wrote to me saying that I'd been dropped from the production. And I wrote back saying, so you're going with the official narrative. And they weren't. Can you think about this? In a two-part, I think it was a two-part documentary about the Spice Girls, they chose to drop the whole idea about the girls' personas because it was too controversial and they didn't want to get embroiled in it. When people think about the Spice Girls, they don't necessarily think of Mel B or Emma. They think about scary, sporty, baby, posh, ginger. That's who they think about. Now, I tell you all this because I'm so sick and tired of other people taking credit. And the Spice Girls were notorious for this. I know a photographer who did some work for them for one project, but they ended up using his work for another project that garnered them a lot of money in terms of merchandise, and he had to get money from them. So this is not uncommon for them. And the thing is it works very well for all of them to say that Top of the Pops named them. And here's why. There's kind of like 3 central reasons, right? One is the record company did not want to admit that the Spice Girls were manufactured. Now, when you have them be their nicknames being named by somebody who's been brought in by the record company, that's manufactured. It looks far better to say that journalists for Top of the Pops, a BBC magazine at the time, journalists for Top of the Pops magazine had named it. It looks better. It looks better all round. Top of the Pops magazine had only been in existence for 1 year. And the Wikipedia entry for Top of the Pops actually uses that Spice Girl claim, say that they were the ones responsible for naming the Spice Girls, right? Everybody benefited from it. Everybody benefited for it. Top of the Pops, only 1 year old, went down in history, benefited in terms of kudos and sales from being known as the magazine that named the Spice Girls. The girls themselves sold millions of pounds of merchandise based on these individual characters. And as I say, the record company got to say, well, they weren't manufactured. This was named organically by Top of the Pops magazine. Now, I say bunkum. I challenge the official narrative. Everybody has made hugely from my work, and I've never asked for money. I'm not interested in money. But some credit would have been nice, right? Some credit would have been nice. I came up with the idea. I should have asked for money, but I didn't. And so the person who came up with the idea has been the one least credited for their role in the Spice Girls. But today, I take back my power. And it feels damn good. It feels damn good. And imagine I'm pretty sure that if I wanted to, I could actually press for a legal case on this, but I don't want to. I just want people to know the truth. And you're not going to find it on Wikipedia. There's a shock. Yeah, I came up with the idea of the Spice Girls having individual personas and named at least 3 of them 3 months before apparently Top of the Pops, a BBC magazine, did. So make of that what you will. I'll tell you what I make of it. I named the Spice Girls. And Jerry and Mel B hated each other, didn't they? Well, they were very similar personalities. Both of them were very forthright, and both of them were sort of vying to be the leader of the pack. Yes, Jerry did get married to a Formula One racing team boss, and miraculously, her voice changed, didn't it? Jerry had a sort of, really reluctant to say a sort of common English voice, but yeah, she did. And then suddenly she sounded like To the Manor Born. Yes, Zoe, I could have made millions. Victoria had more of a business head on her. Yes, she did. But having said that, obviously her husband has ploughed an absolute fortune into her fashion business, and they never break even. And it's always at a loss. And so it's really more of a hobby than anything else. And they did have pathetic solo careers. And actually, one of the pieces of advice that I gave them at the time was, whatever you do, you must stick together, because I could see quite clearly that the whole was bigger than the parts. So there you go. I am going to come back to another story that I'm going to tackle, a viewer question. But just to say, I do have, as I say, I have the documentation there, evidence. I would be happy to have that verified, that when that was written, what I said about them. And yeah, so there you go. Now you know the true story. And don't it feel good? The music industry is made up of liars and thieves.